Hey guys, Sun here. I'm a privacy and a security researcher, and you're watching the Privacy Guides. In last episode, I explained in incredible detail how to make your own little camera covers for your smartphone. Now, some of you may have found that video a bit underwhelming, but there were two key takeaways. The number one is you should absolutely cover those cameras using whatever you have at hand. And the number two takeaway is this recommendation this recommendation I made on this specific tape. Well, I spent a few hours doing research. This is a reusable adhesive that does not cake your screen. And although this may seem obvious, finding the right product took some research. So that being said, maybe you liked it, maybe you didn't. But some of you asked, what are your privacy settings on your iPhone, Sun? And that's a great question and is the subject of today's episode. Now, before we get to the specific settings, which I might keep for a future episode, I want to discuss privacy in the context of a smartphone. Before we start going into the nitty-gritty settings, can we actually be private on an iPhone? And my personal opinion, if you want this episode to finish right now, is no. An iPhone cannot be considered a device on which you'll be private. And there's a bunch of reasons why, and that's what I'm going to discuss today. So first things first, what does your iPhone have, that your computer doesn't? Well, an iPhone is essentially a computer in your pocket. The backend operating system to iOS is similar to what macOS is running, but it's designed in a way where you have a lot less control on what's really happening. For instance, we started using the terminal to run command at the Unix level on macOS. That gives us a lot of control on what's happening behind the scenes. You can also install an application layer firewall on your Mac to really understand what things are doing in the context of the internet. And you can even intercept how specific macOS low-level applications are interacting with the internet. Application layer firewalls will be the subject of a future episode. So if you're into that, smash that subscribe button and we'll get there. Now, can you install a low-level application firewall, on your iPhone? No. Can you use a terminal to hack your iPhone operating system? No. Apps are essentially containers that access the operating system through APIs and through software development kits. And it makes it so that if you really care about privacy and you want to see what's happening under the hood, well, you really can't. So that's one thing that your phone doesn't have. I mean, it doesn't have, a terminal or access to lower level parts of the operating system. Now, what does your phone have that your computer doesn't? Well, it has a GPS chip. That means it's able to know with satellite GPS where you are. It's able to follow you around with a pretty high level of precision. And it also has an LTE network connection, which allows you to make calls, receive SMS messages, and also access the internet off your phone. Now, GPS and LTE are ways that someone can track you. I mean, your phone using the GPS knows your position with a pretty great level of accuracy. Less when you're in a dense city environment, but still a pretty good accuracy, way better than LTE. That being said, LTE, using something, I might mess that word up in English, but triangulation, I think that's it. They can use multiple antennas, and there are, antennas all over the place, to know your location. And that's how they find people that, send distress signals, stuff like this. And your phone also has, your Mac also has it, but it has a Wi-Fi chip and a Bluetooth chip. So, it can connect to wireless networks. It can connect to other devices using Bluetooth. Now, all of what I said, in combination with the fact that you have very little control at the lower level of the operating system, means that this is, as Snowden would say it, essentially a personal tracking device. I mean, this thing is engineered to track you all over the place. And it's very easy for, a government or your carrier to track you around, and there are things you can do, to disable some of these things. And that will be the subject of a future episode. If you're into that, smash the subscribe button. But it still means that we're trusting the operating system a lot. Is it because Wi-Fi is disabled in the user interface? Is it truly disabled? It's hard to know. It's hard to know on macOS as well, but it's excruciatingly hard to know on the iPhone. Now, say you use a vanilla installation of iOS. We know that it has Wi-Fi, it has an LTE chip, and a GPS. I explained really quickly on the video on macOS why I disable location services. If you haven't seen that episode, I'll link it in the description. What that means is your Mac uses the Wi-Fi antenna to track where other Wi-Fi access points are, and it knows how far they are using the strength of the signal. So using that, as you may have experienced, if you go on Google Map and you ask it, where am I? And it shows you your exact location. It can actually almost show you that you're in your house. Well, it does that using Wi-Fi. And the problem is when people take their smartphones and they walk in the street, right? What is their phone doing? When you get home, right? You walk in your house. You look at your phone. It's connected to Wi-Fi, right? Right. How does it do that? Why is it connected to your Wi-Fi? Well, the answer to that is quite sad from a privacy perspective. Your phone is continuously in the background looking for hotspots, access points that it knows. So it sends a broadcast beacon and it's like, hey, surroundings, what Wi-Fi hotspots are there? And then the Wi-Fi hotspots, actually, let me rephrase this. It turns on the antenna and it's listening to hotspots around. And it's like, what are the hotspots that are around me? And then it says, oh, there's my home network. Good, I'll connect because I know that one. It does that using something called MAC addresses. And in one of the previous episodes, I explained how to spoof your MAC address on macOS. And that's fucking amazing. You cannot spoof your MAC address on iPhone. Boom. Another reason why the iPhone is not considered a privacy device. I'll get to others in a second. I'm getting a bit excited here. Oh, this is a fun subject. So the iPhone uses Wi-Fi to listen to available networks, and it then connects automatically. What that means is your Wi-Fi is always on. It's always listening to things. Now, that by itself is not necessarily a huge problem. The huge problem is it also uses your GPS to know your exact location, and it crowdsources where all of the access points are in the world. So when you're walking down the street and your phone is listening for possible access points to which to connect, it also knows exactly where you are. It knows the approximate distance of the access point using the strength of the signal, and it then uploads this information to probably Apple or Google, depending on your operating system, to crowdsource where all of the access points are. And by the way, in the early days when people didn't have smartphones, the Google Maps Street View cars were doing that. They were collecting all of the Wi-Fi hotspots, and it had a GPS, so it was able to map where all of the access points are. And as I mentioned in the episode on spoofing your MAC address, MAC addresses are hard-coded in, the Wi-Fi chip. That means that they never change. So your router at home doesn't change. If you have it for 10 years, well, for 10 years it's the same MAC address. So people know that that MAC address is at that location. That is really frightening. What that means is on your phone, you're actually contributing to tracking everyone around you, and that's really frightening. Bluetooth is something that can be used to do this, and in the context of, I won't mention the name of the crisis right now, Apple and Google are releasing APIs so that your phone can use Bluetooth to crowdsource where infected people are. And that information is written in a database. I won't go into too much detail. I didn't research this deeply enough to talk about it some more, but essentially Bluetooth is a technology that can also be used to track you. And if that wasn't worse enough, and I haven't dug deeply, I'll do an episode on this in the future, but a friend of mine worked for a Wi-Fi tracking company, a Wi-Fi and Bluetooth tracking company in shopping malls. So what he told me is when your phone has Wi-Fi and Bluetooth enabled and you walk around places, it is broadcasting information about you, and that information can be potentially correlated back to you. So what this is a personal tracking device with a bunch of radios that are receiving and sending information continuously about where you are and stuff like that. So I don't think an iPhone or any smartphone can be considered a privacy-centric device in the first place. Now, there are a bunch of things that you can do on your iPhone to increase your privacy given we trust the operating system, and that will be the subject of a future episode. I hope this was interesting to you. If it was, smash that subscribe button, and I'll see you soon for part 2.